Hi, we are back for chapter 17 of Surviving Bear Island. And if you remember, Tom has killed a porcupine and he's eaten most of that, and then he's fixed his gaff and he's got that creek full of fish, and so he stays there for a while. And so here we are at chapter 17. 12 days later, and I'd worn a trail between my bedroom and kitchen. And with the help of RF and LF, we'd come up with a name, Fish Camp. It made sense to me because I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the fish. And we all agreed that it sounded nicer than Swan Bite Camp. Yeah, that thing still itched, but it was getting better. After the porcupine, I'd started keeping track of the days. I don't even know why. I guess I just wanted to know. So every day, I scratched a line on my spear with my knife. I counted backwards and figured it'd been about 11 days between the accident and the porcupine. So I put 11 more marks on the spear. 23 total. Since the raincoat, I hadn't received any more signs that my dad was close by, even though I was always looking, always hoping. I didn't know what else to do besides live at fish camp. You'd think I'd go crazy from loneliness, but I had almost no time to be lonely, except at night. And usually, I was so tired, I just drifted in and out of sleep, making sure to keep RF and LF going. Some nights I'd wake up in a sweat, reliving the accident. Then I'd really build up the fires and lay there in the light, the weight of my mistake pressing down on me. Sometimes I'd think about Heather and whether she was really moving back to Fairbanks. Would I ever get back to see her? And if I did make it back, but my dad didn't, would I get to stay in Fairbanks? Or would I have to go live with my uncle, who I barely knew? And I'd think about my mom and that bike ride, and I'd go back and forth on whether it was my fault. And even if it wasn't my fault, I still felt bad about how things would have been different if I'd gone on the ride. How we would have still been a family instead of two people barely speaking to each other living in the same house. Most nights I woke up thirsty, but didn't want to walk to the creek in the dark. I'd tacked up one of the silver emergency blankets on the dirt wall. It reflected both warmth and light from RF and LF. I'd cut a piece of nylon from the shredded end of my dad's raincoat and wrapped it around the rope on my gaff. That kept the fishing line from cutting through it. And yesterday, I learned by accident that I could dry fish. A bear had come into my camp. I had 3 fish on the fire, almost done. The bear came toward me, attracted by the fish smell, and then retreated as I waved my spear and shouted. This went on for a long time, until I started throwing rocks. No one ever told me to throw rocks at a bear. It was always, play dead, yell or speak softly, back away slowly, or hold your ground, or make yourself look big. All these contradictions. But after I'd pegged the small bear a couple of times, it drew back, then disappeared. When I turned to the fire, the bottom sides of the fish were so burned, they were crispy around the tail and had started to dry out. I wasn't sure how long dried, burned fish would keep, but knew it was my ticket out. The salmon in the stream were thinning out, fewer fish in the school each day, and fish camp would be useless without the salmon. I was at the very back of a big bay on the exposed side of Bear Island, a place I remember Dad saying that people stayed away from. Too far and too expensive. And now it was fall. No one was going to be paddling out here. In the back of my mind, I still hoped someone would show up, but I couldn't count on it. But deciding to strike out from fish camp was still a mixed bag. I'd grown used to sleeping in the same place between the warmth and protection of LF and RF, and the fish had made the difference between life and death. I was thinner than I'd ever been, but I think I'd stopped losing weight since I'd been eating 2 or 3 salmon every day. And I'd staked out my territory and was living in it. I'd chased that bear off, and I'd found Dad's raincoat here. And fish camp was closer to where the accident happened, closer to where I'd last seen my dad. Still, I knew that my chance of survival depended on my leaving. I could slowly starve to death in my comfortable camp, or I could continue my journey to the Sentinels, where I hoped to spot a boat or run into some hunters. And it'd be where my dad would go. Maybe the waves carried him across the mouth of Hidden Bay, and he'd searched for me for a while and then headed to the Sentinels. It was possible. By water, the mouth of Hidden Bay and the site of the accident weren't that far apart. And if anyone could survive some extended time in the water, it was my dad. But even if one or both of us made it to the Sentinels, that didn't ensure anything. If only someone had known that we were going to Bear Island, to the Sentinels. Or if Dad hadn't hid the truck in Whittier, then getting rescued wouldn't be such a long shot. And that's the end of chapter 17. We'll see you tomorrow for chapter 18.